On May 4th, TSN announced its all-time Leafs list. It had to include one current player. Players couldn't change positions. Your centers had to be your centers, etc. And so we thought it would be fun to reach out to some podcast listeners and some people we've known from the past and get their take on the list. We tried to hit a different cross-section of Leaf fans, and so we hope you enjoy this. Okay, I am joined by Toronto resident Steve Key, a fellow podcaster, as a matter of fact, and he has his own travel podcast, Key to Travel. Is that right? Is that what it's called, Steve?
That's right, Key to Travel, and it's now up on most of the major podcasting distribution services. I thought I wasn't going to try to compete on the Leaf podcast. I think you're doing a great job.
It's pretty
so
saturated.
I thought I'd go in a different direction.
Yeah, and you're wearing your it's casual Monday at home, obviously, for the work day. And
I'm lucky I'm out of a robe today.
You should have done the robe.
Yeah, I'm not dressing too much, and I'm actually afraid to put a suit back on when the time comes because it's probably not going to fit.
No, I hear you. I hear you. So Craig Button, along with some other TSN folks, put out an all-time Leafs list. All 7 Canadian teams, actually, and the Leaf one came out today. And so by the time people hear this, they'll already know who's on the list, and so we don't have to really go over it player for player. But I'm trying to touch base with a lot of different age groups of fans and geographical areas for fans, and kind of see how they perceive the list. So, Steve, what was when you first saw it? What jumped off the page for you?
I think what jumped off the page is that you start to look at the Leaf history, and we have 100 years of Maple Leaf history, and there are a lot of players who were well ahead of anything that was in your or my time watching this hockey team. So, for me to say, Silaps is better than Matt Sundin or that, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
We talked about our fathers and what they've told us, and I heard about Teeter Kennedy. My father was a huge Teeter Kennedy fan, so I understand that yes, he was a significant hockey player, but is he a foundational player? He probably represented a lot what this team had to give. But my time picking up watching the Leafs was in the late 60s, around the time of the Stanley Cup, which now makes me sound very old, but going into the 70s. So I look at certain players like Ron Ellis, who I think contributed a great deal to this hockey team, and even Ian Turnbull as players that stand out to me as being sort of special players.
Yeah.
But how they compete with some of those old-time hockey players, different eras, it's hard to tell.
It is hard to tell.
How great King Clancy was. I remember chasing around King Clancy at Maple Leaf Gardens when I was a reporter, so I don't have a chance to know him as a player. But I heard he was pretty feisty.
And one of the conditions of the list, which makes it even more challenging, it's not who are the 12 best forwards for the Leafs all time. It's they had to be positional. So you couldn't move Sittler to the wing or Gilmore to the wing like you can on the Olympic team. So those are two that jump off the page for me, Sittler and a guy like Gilmore, yeah.
Well, yes, and how do you define greatness? When we talk about the NFL, we talk about who's won Super Bowl rings, and a Joe Montana or a Tom Brady versus say a Dan Marino, who was a great quarterback but never won a ring. We have some great players in Toronto that never won a championship, but a 6-team NHL is different than an 18 or 24 or 32 team NHL.
Yeah,
I have to believe that Gilmore and Sittler, in my lifetime, were fantastic hockey players. Are they all-time greats in the big picture? It's interesting because the pandemic has given us an opportunity to see a lot of old-time hockey and some of those the Leafs TV history pieces. it was a lot choppier and slower.
Sure.
You start to think today's hockey, they're faster, they're better athletes, better conditioned, but they dominate at the same level. This is why you put out lists like this, and Craig Button's done a great job to stimulate a lot of debate. But, you know, was Sittler better than Sillaps? I don't know. Sittler was pretty darn good.
Sittler was good, and then you watch him now, or you watch film of him in the 70s, he was a pretty poor skater. So even as power skating improved, as fitness and technique improved, Doug Gilmour, only 15 years later, would skate circles around Darryl Sittler.
Doug Gilmour was a phenomenal talent, a feisty hockey player who had intangibles that we can't believe. This guy did things that were incredible. If you look to the early 90s, what he did with that hockey team, he led them, he pulled them along.
Mm-hmm.
He also had a great supporting cast. That was a pretty darn good and deep hockey team, and something we don't see today. So when I look at him as a hockey player, and then I combine that to, I know they had to put a current player on the team, and I look at Austin Matthews, and I think, yes, talented hockey player, but the new breed, and how does the new breed compare with the old breed? I still think you need more than 3 years in the NHL to give me some feeling that this is going to be great. Same way as, you know, I look at a guy like Thomas Kaberle, and, you know, you may not think of him as one of the top 12 defensemen, but he was pretty darn good for a long period of time with this team.
He was, and so I guess, like, I counted up this morning. I took the entire roster of players who predated our 52-year cup drought here, and I counted out their Stanley Cups individually. There's 5 players on that list that have won 4 Stanley Cups and 2 that won 5 Stanley Cups. So clearly, in this particular survey's mind, championships trump anything else, and it's probably the way it should be.
It probably should be.
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to come back to say that was a 6-team NHL. Now, you had to be the best of the best to be in that NHL.
Yeah.
But the odds of winning were a little easier than in a 30-plus team NHL.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is what we still are talking about today with how can we get this current team over the hump. We have one defenseman post 1967 that made this list. So, like, 50 years, we haven't had a defenseman more worthy than Borje Salming to crack our all-time list. Like, that's a big indictment for me on how this last 50 years has gone. Even though we've had good ones come and go, like Kaberle, and now Riley is in the middle of his career. But yeah, that took some pretty poor scouting.
Riley and Kaberle, for the talent that each of those two men have, they were no Borje Salming.
No.
I saw Salming in his very first exhibition game. I was at the Gardens to see that, and I remember thinking, wow, this guy is pretty darn good. And what he had to go through to be an NHLer, and the abuse he took, and I mean, he was ripped. He was a specimen. He was beyond. I used to say that Borje looked like he always had a pained expression on his face, that, you know, there was something wrong. But he'd be out there for 25, 30 minutes a game and do tremendous things. You don't appreciate how great he was. And if he was on the Montreal Canadiens paired up with Larry Robinson or Serge Savard, I'm sorry, he's the top defenseman in the league.
He's Nick Lidstrom of that era.
Yeah, he is. And we were fortunate to be able to see a player like that here. Mm-hmm. I was lucky to cover the Leafs for radio in the early 80s, towards the end of Borje's time with the Maple Leafs. Just a true gentleman and a really good human being. So I imagine great memories of him.
I imagine you read the book then, his autobiography. Yeah, that's where a lot of the stories, for me, not being a person who consumed all the media about him in the Toronto area, learned about his journey and how hard he had it through his entire career, the abuse that he took. So Yeah, he was a
I was
transcendent
at the Flyer playoff game where the guys were charged with things that went in there, and I remember, I think it was Jack McElhargy or Boris Kinderchuk, I can't remember, one just beating the crap out of Boria behind the net, and he stood in there and did his best to take it, but it was horrible the way he was targeted, and he just proved, and that he had his face stepped on by a skate, and was still able to return. I mean, that guy was, in my books, Boria Salming is one of the top Maple Leafs ever.
All time. Easily.
All time.
Yeah.
No doubt
absolutely.
in my mind.
No, you're right. You're right. Well, Steve, I hate to cut this short. We could probably go on forever. Maybe we will again one day when I'm not trying to do short segments.
Anytime. You can cut anything you want. But you can tell I am passionate about this hockey team, and I've been around to see a lot. So always happy to participate.
Yeah, and I'm gonna stop our recording, but just stay on for a second after this, okay?
Yep.
All right. Okay, I am with Julian Anderson, also known as Jules. Hey, Jules.
Hello.
Hey, so I know Jules from our pub here in town, 5th Street, which is very closed right now, among other things. I think they're trying to get a takeout situation going.
Yeah, that's been ongoing for a while.
Yeah, they've been working on that. So we have had no pub time recently, and hope to get going soon. What's out of 10? What's your level of optimism that this season will finish off in any way, shape, or form?
0.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
They just need to stick a fork in it and move on.
Yeah, that's right. So the reason that I reached out to you is because of all the people I kind of know from our community here. You are really into the history of the Leafs in a way, and you have. What do you have? Do you have a Johnny Bower sweater?
I have a Johnny Bower jersey, which I'm wearing under
jersey. That's right.
I've got a Bobby Baun and a Bill Barocco jersey.
Yeah. So you respect the history of this franchise.
I do. Yeah. The bookcase behind me is mostly Leaf books, and the history of the Leafs is one of the things that attracted me to fandom. Yeah.
It is fascinating and fairly one-sided if you just split their 100 years right down the middle. So it's probably out of all franchises that have been around for a long time, it's probably one of the more polarizing, like half centuries versus other half century that you can find. When this list came out this morning, did anything jump right off the page at you?
Well, I was expecting to see more modern day players just because of the tendency for recency bias, and I was pleasantly surprised that that is not the case.
Yeah.
Apart from their criteria that one current player had to be selected. So it was it was good to see a lot of the historical players, and hopefully this will spur some people to look into those players and what they did for the team, because there's some pretty cool stories.
Yeah, if let's say they didn't have the caveat of a current player, who do you think would have been in that third center position?
Well, it would be a toss-up. I mean, Sittler's name has been bandied about for sure, but Dougie Gilmour also deserves consideration.
Yeah, it would have been one of those two guys, eh?
Mm-hmm. I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a preference to which one you would like to see in there?
Well, my recency bias would say Gilmour.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Sittler, but that was I was pretty young back then, so I don't really remember watching him play. But Gilmour, 93 Leafs was a highlight in my life.
Yeah, Sittler and Salming were my two favorite players growing up, and I just don't know that you can deny Gilmour he had the two greatest offensive seasons in franchise history. You know, nominated for a Hart and won a Selke. Like that's not happened much for this franchise over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, another little thing that jumped off for me was the absence of any defenseman from the kind of last 30 years, which is.
Yeah, I jotted down a few players which who I thought might have been suitable candidates. And Thomas Carola was the only defenseman from recent times that I think might have been able to slot in there.
Yeah, and if you maybe wanted to give the nod to Gilmore as a center and then give Riley maybe a defenseman spot, but use him for the current player spot, that yeah.
As far as dominance goes, I think Matt, if you have to have a current player, I think Matthews is a solid choice.
Yeah, I mean the sample size is small. I mean, but we kind of know what he's all about. And
yeah,
he'll probably end up being the most prolific goal scorer in the franchise history if he.
Yeah, and to be fair, Riley's sample size isn't that much bigger.
Yeah, so it's clear that they really gave the nod to championships over kind of recency bias and some individual statistics, which honestly, I mean, what are we all here for? Like, what would make our lives so much better right now? A Stanley Cup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these guys have them.
Yeah, and I crunched some numbers earlier, and 18 of or 16 out of the 21 players played 10 seasons or more.
Mm-hmm.
And only 35 players have played 10 or more seasons.
Okay.
The 5 that didn't were King Clancy, who's obviously a club legend.
Yeah.
Conacher, Matthews, Lanny McDonald, and Rick Vive.
Right.
Now, Lanny McDonald was I don't remember watching him so much, just like Sittler.
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe Ron Ellis could have been a solid.
I was surprised. I was surprised by Lanny a little bit being there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
maybe that is a bit of he's a bit more current than Ron Ellis, although Ellis played as a Leaf longer than McDonald after McDonald as well. But
and Lanny made 2 teams lists. He made Calgary's list.
Oh yeah, of course.
As the foundational player. I don't think he actually slid into the roster though. Yeah. So,
I haven't been following the other teams.
Yeah, I just heard that today that he was on both teams, on 2 teams. Yeah. Goaltending is interesting too, hey?
Yeah.
Johnny Bauer.
Yeah, but 2 of the most the goalies with the most tenure and games played.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just looking up here to crunch my numbers, but they're far and away the franchise leaders in goaltending position in games played.
Yeah, and
Felix Potvin well ahead of him.
Yes, I did a cup count on all the older players this morning, and Broda had 5 and Bauer had 4, so you just can't deny that, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And 18 of the 21 players are Hall of Famers.
Is that right? Is that the number?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to eliminate. You just have to eliminate our bias to want to compare the eras and the abilities throughout the eras, because everything evolves, right? Everything is better now than it was hockey-wise as far as shooting skill, goaltending styles, that sort of thing. So you just have to go with the results, really.
Yeah, and they didn't play as many games in a season back then, so the stats might not be as high.
Yeah.
It was a totally different game.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, they only started raising the puck in the 50s kind of thing, right?
Correction, I think there's 17 Hall of Famers, not 18. But...
Okay, but still. Yeah.
Vaughn, Clark, Vive, and Matthews haven't yet made it.
Yeah, and hopefully, if we redo this list in 10 years, we can replace some of those players with some cup winners.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
That'd be,
And until then, you're going to have to put up some pretty damn good single season and Leaf career numbers to unseed guys who have multiple Stanley Cups.
mm-hmm.
That's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing I noticed was 11 of the 21 players were on the NHL's top 100 players list from a few years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's over half the team.
Yeah, that's well represented as well. So I don't think they got it too wrong. I mean,
no,
I don't remember watching, or I mean, you hear a lot. There's guys that plays in the 30s and in the 40s, but like
no. And is there even any footage of them playing? Yeah,
no, there's probably not much at all. So but they did get the results. I guess if I could maybe, if I could make one change, I might want to. It's at that center ice position. I would maybe take out. I maybe make Riley the current player and put in Gilmore. I think that's the change that
Gilmore is a solid pick. I mean, top scorer single season in the franchise history.
Yeah, but otherwise it's
the heart he had played with. That's what we're lacking now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Players like him who carry the team.
Yeah, exactly. But having said that, you know what? Like Matthews gave Leaf fans a major award. He won Rookie of the Year, and I don't think there was some insane stat when that happened about how long it's been since a Leaf player won a major award. And I think it was Gilmore winning the Selke back in '93.
Yeah,
best defensive forward.
Calder, I think it was back in the '50s, was it, or '60s?
Yes, it was. Yeah, last time we had a Rookie of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we had some high draft picks. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is an accomplishment that I guess can't go unrecognized as well.
Although I'm still slightly bitter about Gary Suter getting it over Wendell back in the '80s.
I do remember that actually, and imagine that being a debate today with social media.
Yeah,
that'd be a very heated debate. And I remember it was even heated back in the day of just kind of like newspapers and television news shows, because we didn't have 24-hour sports talk back then or anything like that. Yeah, that was kind of the beginning of kind of mass media. But that was a close race, and I did think it went the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
But that is my bias. So
yeah.
Well, Jules, thanks very much for hopping on and doing this with me.
You're welcome.
And
can I throw a few more stats at you?
You go ahead. Absolutely.
Okay. So the 21 players include 11 of our top 13 goal scorers, 11 of the top 20 assist makers, and 12 of the top 17 point scorers.
In Leaf history?
In Leaf, yeah. As a Leaf, yeah.
So, that is quite remarkable that when you bring that up, because like we said, they did play less games.
Mm-hmm.
Players are bigger, faster, stronger now. Goaltending has evolved, but those numbers are still standing.
Yeah. Right?
And overall that time.
Yeah, and 12 of them are in the top 20 of games played.
Yeah. So that is quite. I guess. I mean, they did a good job. They didn't just take the easy way out. And just go for the.
Yeah, so many to choose from, but I think it's fairly good list.
Yeah, it was initiated mostly by Steve Dryden,
mm-hmm.
who is actually the quiz master. On the guy that James Duthie in the panel referred to as the quiz master. That's Steve Dryden.
Oh yeah.
And I think he used to be an editor of the Hockey News, and now he works for TSN. And then Craig Button had a big part in it as well.
Speaking of quizzes, who holds the record for most goals in an overtime period?
Most goals in an overtime period?
Yeah, single game overtime.
Wouldn't the number be 1?
Today it would be.
You mean they didn't? So back when they didn't play sudden death.
There was a time when it was, you played until the overtime was over.
I'm just gonna say Charlie Conacher.
No, but that you get the era right. It was Ken Doherty got a hat trick in overtime.
No shit.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what we should do? We should have a little Zoom quiz of our own. A little Leafs Zoom quiz.
Mm-hmm.
One night for YouTube or something like that, and throw out some trivia. You can throw together some stuff for us. We'll have a fun night with some drinks and some Leaf trivia. We'll get a few people good on. Hey, that'd be kind of fun.
We'll see if I can dig up a prize for that
and find the time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah, and you say to dig up a prize for that, and I know that you have just a prize, and we'll just leave it at that, and we'll make this a 100% thing that we're going to do, and the prize will be announced.
Sounds good.
Okay, Jules.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care and go Leafs.
You too. Go Leafs. Go.
All right.
All right. Okay. So I am with the oldest person I know. I am with my dad, Fred Bast in Regina, who has seen almost everybody play who's on this list. I would argue that maybe you didn't see anybody you didn't see here, Dad?
Yepper.
Busher Jackson.
King Clancy, Red Horner.
You didn't see them? No.
Busher Jackson.
Because you were born in 1938.
Yeah.
All right. So when you saw this list, did anything jump at you as far as like any players who you maybe should have been on there? Maybe more modern players that you thought were more worthy than older players, or?
Well, the thing is, some of these players I never saw play. I heard them.
Yeah, you heard them on the radio. That's true.
But there's one thing that I thought of right away. Red Kelly. You know, didn't he play both ways? Didn't he play defense and forward?
Yeah. Didn't he become a referee as well?
He became a coach.
Oh, coach. That's right too.
He coached the Leafs for a while.
Yeah, so he played both. So maybe that hurt him in the end, playing both positions.
Yeah, it could have.
Yeah.
They tossed him.
The one thing I noticed about this list is that they obviously weighed heavily with Stanley Cups. That was obviously a huge consideration.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I counted 5 of the older players had at least 4 Stanley Cups, 2 had 5 Stanley Cups, and then Sillaps had 3. Red Horner had no cups with the Leafs as far as I could tell.
Yeah.
But he played 12 seasons. So I mean, he's a defenseman, but I don't know, wouldn't maybe a Ian Turnbull or someone like that maybe been more worthy of a more familiar player? I don't know.
I couldn't figure Red Horner in. Mind you, I was 2 years old when he quit.
Yeah.
With the Leafs.
So you didn't have a good read on him, obviously.
There wasn't even radio back then, I don't think.
So what was the first year you ever watched a Leaf game on TV?
When TV started, I think it was in '53.
Oh yeah.
On CBC with Ward Cornell and what the heck was that SO agent's name?
SO agent. I remember all the SO commercials.
Yeah.
So who do you think is like of the players who obviously your glory days of being a Leaf fan was in your 20s and 30s, right?
Well, before that.
On this list, who was like your favorite from those like 4 cups they won in the 60s? Like there's like Horton and Armstrong and guys like that.
Tim Horton, Alan Stanley was one of my guys. And, well, the 50s and 60s, Frank Mahovlich, but that trader went to the Canadians.
Well, did that change your opinion of him?
It did.
Was he traded or did he just leave as a free agent? Because they didn't have free agency back then, did they?
Oh, they traded him, and then he did one thing worse. He became a Liberal candidate.
All right, this is not a political podcast.
I know.
Yeah, I think you probably influenced me in my young years to be a Dave Keon fan.
Yeah,
I think he's probably one of the first players I remember.
Davey Keon, George Armstrong, the chief. He was a kind of a tiger out there.
And then Bobby Bond, he scored the goal with a broken leg.
Yeah.
Right, so that's you got to give a guy credit for that.
Do you have anything on Carl Brewer there?
I know they didn't put him on here at all, did they?
No.
No, that's interesting. He was well, I don't know who you'd bump, maybe Red Horner, but because he was a defenseman, Carl Brewer, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if they have left defense and right defense here. I wonder if maybe he didn't. Maybe I don't know if he was a left or a right D.
As far as King Clancy was concerned, and a defenseman, I think he was all over the ice.
Yeah, really. I know. Do you think the list is pretty fair then? Like,
I think so.
Is there any more modern players that you think should have been in there, like Gilmore or anyone like that? Or
well, it's hard to say. Who do you knock out?
well, he's a center, right? So he would have had to knock out Sillaps or Sundin, and they had to have one current player. That was a criteria for the list.
Yeah. Well,
so
I'll tell you,
uses there.
I would have maybe put what's his name? Who are we talking about here?
Oh,
Gilmore.
Gilmore, yeah.
I would have put Gilmore in instead of Sillaps.
Okay.
Because Sillaps was a finesse player.
Yeah.
He was offense only. And
right.
Gilmore, well, he took the stick from Gretzky.
Yeah, no, he did do that. Yeah. The Kerry Fraser play.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I guess someone who would be defending Sillaps would say he won 3 cups, and I guess you just can't argue with Stanley Cups because we haven't had one in 52 years. So
yeah,
I guess that's kind of why they play the game, right?
And that was back when they had 50 games?
Yeah, 50 games. They had to win 2 playoff series to win the cup.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a watered down league either. It was all the best players all the time, every night.
The hammers, no helmets.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Dad, I'll let you go have some lunch. I know how you get grouchy when you're hungry.
Yeah, my stomach's growling already.
All right. Well,
okay, take care.
What up, bud?
Hey, buddy.
How's it going?
Good. How's it going with you?
Oh, it's going all right. A little tired.
Yeah.
I've been getting myself in some shenanigans. It's May. You know, the weather's starting to get good. It's starting to get great here in Toronto, or it was yesterday. So.
Yep. Yeah, I saw you had a little bit of a dance with some Pink Whitney and a hockey stick.
Yeah. A little bit of a bender, my man, and as a result, now I'm paying for it. So please drink responsibly out there for anyone who's listening. Don't do what I did.
We're all entitled to just let one go once in a while here, eh?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. You know.
Yeah. So the all-time list, according to TSN, came out today.
Right.
And so I just want to have a quick chat before you go have a nap.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that. I'm gonna need that too. But I had a glance, but I saw they were kind of doing those teams, and there's a couple of things that sort of stood out. First off, number one, I didn't see Dougie on there.
No, Dougie's not on there.
Which is, for me, I'm just sort of like everybody, when they think about like Leafs hockey and stuff like that, it's like usually Wendell Clark, Dougie Gilmore, and the most amount of points in a season by a Leaf was him. I also kind of found a little bit that I didn't know if they included enough of kind of like the modern players. I mean, my argument, like I saw they had Matthews on there, and then I guess like Sundin, but other than that, it's like all those other guys playing like the fucking like 70s, 60s, and stuff like that. I'm like, like I don't know, maybe Morgan Riley, like what?
Well, the criteria, what the important criteria were, you had to have one current player. Okay. And then you couldn't move people out of their position. So you couldn't put a center at the wing just because he was really good and should be on the list. So they tried to keep it positional. So, I mean, Sillaps over Dougie, like, I don't know. Like, I didn't see Sillaps play. But it seems –
Did anybody?
No. I just talked to my dad. And he's seen a few of these guys play or heard them on the radio.
Right.
And
started doing the radio, though, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think obviously there's two things that stood out to me. We have one defenseman on it from the last 50 years, which is just sad. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad scouting and drafting, right?
Yeah, 50 years. Holy.
Like Boreas Salming is the only one. And this list is heavily weighted based on championships, and maybe that's the way it should be.
Right. So they're basically only getting the guys that actually did stuff for the Leafs back in the day. Well, Dave Keon was on it though.
Dave Keon, he won a few cups. He won 3 cups, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone loved Dave Keon too. I saw Wendell Clark was on there, but I know Wendell Clark didn't win one with the Leafs, but I guess you could not include Wendy on there. But no, it definitely was based more on championships. And I guess if people were to say that, like, if they look at Toronto as like a historic franchise, which they would compared to like all the original 6 teams, and they have so many more players to choose from, I guess most of their winning was done in the first 50 years of their existence.
All the winning.
Basically all the winning,
which is sad. So like the only players that maybe you and I – or I watched a couple of. I don't remember really watching David Keon. I remember watching Tim Horton a little bit as a kid, but maybe Wendell, Lanny McDonald, Rick Vive, Sundin, and Salming. I mean, and you didn't see Salming, right? But
no, hell no.
For someone your age and vintage, like this list is just a bunch of guys, bunch of dudes, right?
Maybe you could argue and say Wendy just because of the fact that. Like, I started following him. He was, like, right at the end of his career. And he wasn't really, like, the force he was. But, anyways.
Yeah.
Holy jeez.
So, it's interesting little content project there. And, we need stuff like that in these days and age. So, I'll ask you. Go ahead.
Well, first off, I was going to say, was this Mackenzie and LeBrun that did it?
No, it was more Craig Button and some other, and then mostly driven by Craig Button. Yeah.
Okay, Craig Button. All right, gotcha. Were you gonna ask me?
And so we'll end here with a little current event question. They signed that Finnish defenseman today, that Lettinen.
Oh, right. I heard that they were. That was so they actually did. I didn't read that.
Yeah, so they got him on a deal for next year or whatever year we're in, or however we start to adjust our timelines. But so another left shot though. So that
that was gonna be my next question, was left or right.
That's a crowded house, man. Like I think you might see maybe Dermott become expendable there if this guy's a player. Hey?
Yeah, well, it depends. First off, Lettinen, if I correctly, so he came from the SM Liga, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And he's like, what, 20 – is he 23 or something?
He's one of those sort of mature guys in his mid-20s, yeah. Like ready to go, right? No,
ready to go
right away. Cooking. Yeah.
Yeah, he was always – Dermott, I could see potentially – being expendable also too because of the fact that I get the feeling a little bit he might have a little bit of contract standoff with Toronto. Mm-hmm. And no one said anything about that, but a lot of those other guys were quick to sign deals. Like I know Hall was supposed to become I don't know if he was supposed to be restricted or unrestricted, but he signed a 3.
Yeah.
Oh, he was unrestricted, and then Engvall signed like a 2-year, and Dermott's a guy they kind of wanted to lock up, but I think maybe his thought is going to be that like, oh yeah, I played, like 3 seasons and such, and even though he isn't really like a dominant defenseman in the NHL, he's like, I mean a lot more to this team. So I could see them asking for like his party for like, $3 or $4 million. The Leafs are like, okay, we'll bridge you like 2 years or 3 years at like $2 million or something. So I don't know. I have that's just sort of my opinion that I could see that happening. So maybe Dubas is trying to stock up on the left side to be like, okay, anything could happen.
Yeah, he could be included in a package too. Like he could feel a need for another team because like that left side, you got Riley, Sandin, Muzzin, Hall.
Yeah.
Now and Dermott. I mean, unless they say that he might be the most adept at moving to the right side if need be. So
yeah, Dermott can play right. I've seen that. I've seen him be able to do that too. So it all depends. I'm not gonna rule that out, but I would think right now the Leafs are looking to add on their D and not subtract. So unless Dubas is like, okay, this guy, there's a potential he could play in the AHL. Who knows?
Yeah, on the right side for sure. They need some.
Yeah.
All right, bud. We'll keep this short. I got some other calls to make about this list. All right. Thanks for stepping up.
Yeah. I'm going to nap now. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye.